This is U.S. History Regents Review, Unit 2, Video 3. We left off talking about the Monroe Doctrine. This is a significant part of foreign policy that you need to know for this exam. The Monroe Doctrine is when James Monroe wrote to Europe that they need to stay out of the Western Hemisphere, North and South America, because this is our turf now. He said, you are not allowed to colonize here anymore. So I like this little picture saying, hands off, Europe. This is our space now. Now, of course, at the time, this was just a strongly worded letter. We were not going to do anything to enforce it. We didn't really have a military to do that with. But this sets the tone for the United States, having the sense that this is our turf and we are in control of Latin America. It is part of our interests. Here is a very important and controversial president, Andrew Jackson. He is a Jeffersonian. He's a Democratic Republican. He gets the nickname the People's President because he becomes known for being a champion of the common man. But I should add, what this means is the common white man, farmers. He's from the frontier out in Tennessee area. He's the first person to be from this area. People loved him because he was a war hero from the War of 1812, hugely popular. He first runs for president in 1824. And if you look at this electoral map, he is the green. He gets the most electoral votes out of the four candidates. He gets the most popular votes out of the four candidates. However, he did not get a majority, more than half, of the electoral votes required. Therefore, instead of just winning, the decision went to the House of Representatives. And in the House of Representatives, which was controlled by Henry Clay, the Speaker of the House, Henry Clay ends up convincing people to vote for John Quincy Adams instead. And then John Quincy Adams becomes president and gives Clay the position of Secretary of State, which at that time was basically a guarantee to become the president. So all of this happens and Jackson is pissed. He feels that the presidency has been stolen from him and he promises that he will get vengeance. And he does come back with a vengeance 4 years later in 1828 and wins that election. The second he wins that election, remember, he's the common man. He's the people's president. He uses the spoils system. This is where you give federal jobs to your supporters. To the victor goes the spoils. Since I have won the presidency, since my party is in power, I'm going to give all the jobs to the people who are loyal to me. We will see this also called patronage in later parts of this century as well. The practice of giving political jobs to your supporters. Andrew Jackson becomes famous for a few reasons. First of all, he declares war on the Bank of the United States. He thought it was a corrupt institution, who, by the way, Henry Clay also supported, so there's a personal reason there. He didn't like it. And he vetoed the recharter of the bank, and then he defunded it. He took out all the money and put it into state banks instead. This killed the bank. He successfully ends a nullification crisis. Remember, to nullify means to reject a federal law. The state of South Carolina did not like a new tariff, and they said they were going to nullify it and refused to pay the tariff. Jackson thinks that's unacceptable, and he threatens to go right to the state and hang John C. Calhoun and anybody who refused to pay this tariff. Eventually, they come to a compromise, but it shows that Jackson is willing to uphold the power of the federal government over state governments. But remember, this issue is going to come up again with the Civil War. Andrew Jackson is most notorious for this decision, historically considered to be horrible and cruel and awful, but was also the policy of most of the presidents, which was Indian removal, the process of removing Indians from their land in order to give that land essentially to white settlers. So in 1830, he signed the Indian Removal Act, which forced the Indians, in particular the Cherokee, to leave their land and march west of the Mississippi River to Indian Territory. That's modern-day Oklahoma. This is actually carried out after he's president, but for um, the Supreme Court case, Worcester versus Georgia, the Supreme Court actually decided that states don't have power over the affairs of Indians. Georgia had been trying to remove Native Americans and take away their rights. And the federal court said, no, you can't do that. Jackson ignores that, however. He rejects that Supreme Court case, which is a problem with checks and balances. He just ignores the court. You can see this is why people accuse Jackson of being King Andrew. He ignores the Supreme Court in this situation. He also, by vetoing the bank, was seen as going against the will of the people. Because remember, Congress is supposed to represent the will of the people, and he used his veto power frequently. Ultimately, the Indian Removal Act leads to the Trail of Tears, which is carried out after his presidency, which is the forced journey of the Indians west, where many of them died from hunger and exposure. Probably tens of thousands of natives died along the way. Now we're going to start talking about economic changes. And I want to start by talking about Henry Clay. So Henry Clay is the leader of the Whig Party. This party forms in opposition to Andrew Jackson. They feel threatened by his abuse of power. And they have some other things they're really interested in. Particularly, they support the creation of infrastructure. Infrastructure is the fancy word for the building of roads, canals, railroads, etc. So Henry Clay famously creates his plan called the American System. And it's an American system because it unites the North, South, and West and all of their interests together. The first part of this is a protective tariff. He argued that tariffs are going to promote American manufacturing and would raise money for the federal government, which then could be spent on internal improvements. So this would help the East. If you go up north into the East, all the major cities would do well because of the manufacturing would be helped by tariffs. Then he said, we need a national bank. This would manage the whole system. It would create a national currency. This would help every part of the country. And then internal improvements. So this is where the government would take all that money and spend it on transportation, improving roads and canals. This would help grow the South because the South would send its raw goods up to the North would manufacture them, and then send them right back to the South. And then any increase in road systems and canals is going to help the West as people move out that way. So the economy started to change rapidly. This is the early 1800s. And we call this time the market revolution. This is the transition from the United States having a traditional economy where goods are made by hand for household consumption to an economy where goods are mass produced and exchanged in markets. So you create a lot of things and then sell them. So instead of custom making shoes for everybody, you just create a whole bunch of shoes in different sizes and allow people to buy them in the open market. Manufacturing is developing, particularly water power is being used to run mills, especially textile mills. And new technology is emerging that is changing the country. The power loom is making a really booming textile industry up north that even some women are starting to work in. So some women are working outside of the house. The cotton gin is going to revolutionize the country. The cotton gin is going to make it easier to produce cotton. This in turn makes slavery more profitable as they are able to create more cotton. It gets the name King Cotton. And the transportation revolution is the improvement in roads, the building of canals, and later railroads, and the development of steamships, all making travel and trade easier and more efficient. The Erie Canal in particular is a huge transformation. It is built right here in New York, and it connects the Atlantic Ocean in New York City all the way to the Great Lakes. It changes the entire country by uniting it through trade and movement.